Okay, I think we're live. So welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for November 11th, 2024. We will follow our standard approach of going through the issues that were tagged in the issue that was created in the TSC repo, which was 1662. Before we jump into that, does anybody have any news they'd like to share? Okay, I guess we have no news this week. So our typical reminder, remember to nominate people for the contributor spotlight. In terms of updates from the board meeting or CPC, we don't have any of our reps, so I'm going to say no updates this week. So then the first, oh, wait a sec, we just have Matteo, so maybe we'll promote him and see if there is any updates on the board or anything. Hello, Matteo.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
We were just at the CPC and board meeting updates, so anything to share this week?
No, the biggest, like the biggest stuff, all the biggest things for the board were done last month.
Okay.
So I don't think there is
Okay.
there is anything more to share apart from, as soon as I recommend everybody to watch Robin talk at NodeConf as soon as it gets published. So don't know what's holding up there. So I'm trying to chase it.
That's about funding and stuff like that, right?
Yes. It explains the budgets. Okay,
Yeah.
like essentially, it explains the budget. So I that's it really.
Okay. No call you after it is published. Okay. So let's move on to the issues then. So Node.js Node, the first one is FS enabled chunked reading for large files and read filed handle. I'm just jumping in there. If you put it onto the agenda, just jump in.
So
I
I
think
put
you
it on
actually added
agenda.
that. Sorry, go ahead.
And in this case, it's more about like if we want to have the possibility for a read file to read huge files into memory, or if we should just accept the current limit as an upper bound and change the error message to use streams instead. I couldn't think of any real use case where it would be beneficial to load anything beyond 2 gigabytes into memory. I thought it's a good thing to just briefly discuss if there is an opinion.
I guess the downside of letting it read in is there one, like in terms of the implementation, or is it just a matter of we've got an arbitrary limit?
At the moment, on Linux, it's just not possible in one read. And that wouldn't be a problem because we could do multiple reads in our internal implementation, and therefore we can overcome it. It's more about if we do that, it will probably cause a lot of people to just use read file in places where they shouldn't. And I fear that this will make situations in real life applications worse.
Matteo has his hand up.
So okay, I'm going to say something that is refer to some nasty comments that I received in the last few weeks. Okay, of when I tried to be prescriptive and tried to prevent people to cause themselves so much harm. Okay, they were very upset about it. So, okay, that is my 2 cents. Okay, to be honest, I think it's a right call. They should not be reading a file of 2 gigs, but I'm not going to oppose if you have a lot of if we have if we have a decision on that. So I don't have a big problem.
I mean, so far there wasn't a strong push for it. It was more about like people ran into this error and then it was like discussed where this error is actually coming from. And when that was detected, it was like, well, we can overcome it by just doing multiple reads internally and accepting it. And that's why we now have a pull request open for implementing something like that. And in this case, I'm just wondering to instead clarify in the error message that they should instead just use read stream. And that would probably also solve the problem out of my perspective, at least for now.
Does the read also allow an offset? Like, I'm just wondering, like, if somebody really, really wanted to do it, could they just do two reads themselves, one with an offset that's that
You can
problem?
always do that. I mean, FS has the possibilities to do reads individually. It's just a utility function of read file in this case.
Right. Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't have any objection to leaving it as it. Like, if we think just reading huge files is really not the right thing, then just leaving it as is seems re reasonable. And people can still do it. They just have to do a little bit more work, which maybe shows that they really know what they're doing, so it's okay, right?
Pretty much, yes. There are a few hands up.
Sorry, yeah, Matteo, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we should like unless we have a good reason to -1 it, I think we should allow it and let them crash for not enough memory. I think it's a bigger. They will crash anyway, so I'm just. We should did put some docs on when they crash for that. Put that on the website in the guides. How can I read a large file? This is the error, so the Google can pick it up.
Julie,
So
is
you
your
would
hand up?
actually
Sure.
accept it.
Hmm?
So you would accept the PR.
I would accept the PR. Yeah, I have not. I don't think we should block this. We should accept it.
Julie has her hand up.
Yeah, I don't see a reason to uh throw an error for this. If people do want to take risk, let them do so. We can emit a warning or something telling them if you really you better know what you're doing. And we suggest that you use the strings, but otherwise I don't see a reason to make it error. Like some people may just be lazy. And there are always people just trying to write throwaway scripts and are just lazy. That's fine.
I'm more worried about actually people not reading the documentation. So they would not see this warning at all. And therefore, the error will be something where they will learn about this in the first place, because most people have no idea about streams. Like it is sadly the truth, and that in a lot of circumstances, many developers have never used them or heard about them before.
No, I mean, we can emit a warning, not a doc warning.
Right. I would be fine with that. I'm not certain if, and this is not controversial on its own as well.
I guess it's certainly like less annoying than just outright fail. Or previously just outright fail. Like if people are just got bothered by the warning, we can remove it. But if we do think that we should steer people in the right direction, we can just emit a warning and then let them do what they want. Maybe they're just lazy.
I would be good with that. I mean, we could even impose that warning from a lower level on, because it would probably even trigger it from, let's say, a gigabyte onwards. That could be a solution. So should we have that as a recommendation from our round from today?
Sounds
Good.
reasonable to me.
then I guess we are done with this topic.
Okay. Okay. So Ruben, you'll comment on the issue?
Will do.
I'm sorry, but throwing a warning, emitting a statement when we are dealing with a low-level API, is it a good idea? I'm just wondering if there are usage errors or usage of the platform in a way which can potentially destabilize the platform itself, are the ones which I would qualify for throwing warnings and errors. But inefficient usage of an API or overutilization of resources, should it throw a warning?
Well, it can easily cause the process to crash. And the users can easily run into out of memory usage. I believe this is something that would be beneficial for them to understand why they are running into it, because they probably don't. Like, even when they receive the error that something is out of memory, they will not immediately understand the reason.
But it's not it doesn't indicate a bad design of the code or even a bad programming practice. It's the situation is just driven by the data, volume of data. But the code itself is good. So why would we warn if a resource intensive operation is crashing the program? Then that itself is an indication of heavy reading or heavy usage of the data. But the code that would run fine in another circumstances when there is very low data which is being attempted from another file. So why would we warn on the code is my question.
I guess like one thought that I would have is if we're going to get people opening issues because they're running out of memory and can't figure out why, and this makes it easier for them to understand that, like maybe that would be an argument to leave it only at the 2 gig limit so that it's like, hey, it used to just fail. Now it works, but there's a warning. Like, so nobody who didn't get a warning before is going to get a warning. But sorry, Joey, go ahead.
We can also just check the available memory. That's not, well, we don't really have a very accurate way to check this if C groups is in use, I think. But at least we can do some naive checking to see if it's actually going to run out of memory. If it's like there's plenty of memory around, maybe just like don't care. But like if you are actually going to run into an out of memory situation according to calculation, you warn.
Isn't a doc a good place to capture the behavior under circumstances? And if user hits such circumstances, the API doc will clearly help them understand why this happened.
I tried to outline that earlier. I don't believe that the documentation alone will be sufficient. Sadly, the documentation is not checked frequently enough. Mostly, like if you have an example, for example, from a Stack Overflow or anywhere else, it's like some guideline how to implement something, and they will just use the API without giving it much thought what they are actually going to load with that operation, because it will work by default for small files. But if you load a huge file into memory, it will not only take a long time for it to load into memory as a whole, whatever you want to do with it, which is I don't know if what is inside that file. If you want to stream it, it's probably not a good, or want to deliver it somewhere else. It's normally not a good idea to keep it in a buffer and to load it up front before you start sending it out, which would be a good implementation for a stream. Another thing would be transformations of files, which you normally also want to do in chunks. And as such, it's much faster and more reliable from a memory perspective. Like indicating to the users that the current behavior is mostly bad is probably good. Like especially when we are coming from a current situation where we have clearly thrown an error so far, so it was just not possible to use it in that way. I would say a warning is definitely like a good handling for it so that they will at least know about this implication.
I think the warning is, I think having the warning at that limit when it crashed before is fine. Okay. Frankly, and we have other places where we have similar warnings. So for example, when we had more than 10 listener on event emitter, okay. There is even a more annoying one, which is on a board controller. So, and signal and so on and so forth, where we had too many of those. Well, with the events, web events things, when we had too many, we have the same warning, but this happens all the time. Okay.
Yeah, those are valid bad coding practices or listener leak, clear indication of listener leak if warning is not printed.
It's the same though. Like it falls in the same box. Like I don't see any application that lost 2 gig in memory, any node application that lost 2 gig in memory to be working well in any, like it's lazy, okay, and it's fine, but if it's lazy, you can phantom. You can see a warning essentially, so you know that you're lazy.
Yeah, that's my thoughts as well. Like, if people just want to be lazy and just write some throwaway scripts that just want to process a huge amount of buffer and I don't know, find the number of zeros in it, whatever. Oh well, that's whatever they want to do, then it's fine if they have that much memory. That there's no need to like prevent them from doing that. Sometimes people are just lazy.
I mean, isn't it like in this case, and pretty much if we do we know a use case, a legitimate use case for loading a whole file into memory that is of that size? Because actually, that's my main concern. Like thinking about even with a warning, again, I'm not too happy about it because as long as I don't find a single use case where I would say this is the right thing to do, then not doing it, not allowing it is probably best.
I mean,
Do we have toggles here?
Sure, go ahead, Joey.
Do we have toggles here? I remember toggles and someone else gave a talk about processing scientific data, and then like in their talk they just mentioned this use case where they have huge amount of data file containing some molecules, and then they were just trying to process it, and the file was too big, so they have to do chunk encoding. But might be just fine if they're using a very beefy computer and just process everything in one go.
Consider that if you buy top of the line Mac today, you have 128 gigabyte of RAM. To be clear, okay. So the use case can also be why not, okay. Like
I'm just lazy. It's just
no, but this is it's going to be extremely bad for us from a server perspective, I would say, but on a developer machine, this might be okay.
Yeah, if they're just doing test processing, that seems
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. So it's but again, a warning. I would say I'm in for a warning. Like this is lazy. Like
It's
again,
anti-pattern.
you can buy a laptop with 128 gigabyte of RAM today, which seems insane, considering like I don't know.
Yeah, the warning seems like a compromise between like doing nothing and preventing it.
I guess we'll I'm curious about how many implications I would find at some point when we accept it. I'm good with I will accept the warning. I wouldn't go without any warning at all. Like either I would go for not accepting it in the first place or going for the warning because I mean if you have a file of that size, no matter that it is that our machines are becoming more beefy, and obviously memory is not as critical anymore. And just like if you still have a program and that is running fast and using its memory properly, that's a good thing. So do we agree on the warning? Because that's still my main question. Like, as I said, like I would, for now, I would veto for just the implementation as such, because I still didn't hear of a use case and that this would really require, like Joey, for example, and what you've just spoken about, because if someone really needs to read all of that part into memory, they will have the APIs and the possibility to implement that on their own just by reading chunks of that huge file.
I think it's more about UX compared to like performance. Sometimes people are just lazy, they just write some throwaway script and that's it. And they choose Node because that's what they're familiar with. They will otherwise go with other language. But it's just that process something and they're just lazy and they don't really need to write the best code possible to do what they want to do. And it's not something that they have to do to like read all that into the buffer, but like it would just make the throwaway script even shorter to write because then you don't need to think about how do you do streaming properly, how do you do all that. You just like I'm just spending 10 minutes to write a text processing script instead of trying to figure out how to use strings because I'm just writing a throwaway script and try not to spend too much time on this.
So, and then I believe we're currently discussing more like of a consensus. Does anyone oppose the warning?
I need to think a little more, Ruben, on that. I mean, the reason why I think about that is because I don't see a problem with the code if you decide to read a huge chunk of data, unless, I mean, unlike the leaking listeners scenario where that was a buggy code. Here, I don't see a bug in the code. We are doing something consciously. We know that there is a huge amount of data that is read into the system. And as long as there is a valid use case for that, I shouldn't be warned. That's my point. But let me read through both the issue and the PR to get a better grip on the context and make an update in that rather than just being stubborn on that idea.
So in that case, I guess it's best to just bring it up next week again and like see if there is a decision.
Makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm just gonna make that in the minutes and okay. So let's move on to the next one, which is test improve zlib tests number 55716. This is, I think this one was on the agenda because it was related to using the new test runner. I'm not sure if there's still things to discuss here. There was going to be some other documentation that was going to be landed, so maybe add restrictions about node test usage. That's this PR. I'll paste into the chat. There's a bunch of discussion in that issue. I don't know if anybody wants to summarize or comment on that. Otherwise, I'm just going to put in the minutes that like we're waiting for that PR to land as the next step. Make sense? Okay, if I don't hear any objections, I'll move on to the next one, which is clarify the charter so that contractors are explicitly counted as affiliated. That one, I think we have some +1s, went to the CPC. I think there is one suggestion that we try and clarify specifically, a little bit more specifically, affiliation or not affiliation. Like, you know, if you're a contractor, but you're only 5% associate, being 5% paid, does that count or not? I don't know if people have thoughts on that. I think in my mind, the key discussion is like, do we want to leave it just high level and somewhat vague? Or do we want to try and narrow down specific issues like that to make it 100% clear? And I guess my view is like, can we find all the edge cases, or is it going to be enough just to have it like, hey, the intent is that like if you're affiliated enough and being a contractor, you know, is considered that, then it still counts.
I am okay either way, frankly. I didn't want to be this precise, but I'm happy with the suggestion from Ulysses, I would have to say. It's
Anybody have any concerns with the suggestion? I mean, we can always tweak if it's too precise or misses something, but if we're okay, then maybe the easiest path is just to accept that. And
for me, I have no, like, again, it's important that it's clear, okay? Because we considered it even in the past as something like that, okay? We have I think we interpreted in this way when the IBM Red Hat merger happened, if I recall correctly.
yeah, we were like, well, effectively, you know, it's more the spirit of if you're effectively working as the same group, then it counts, right? And like a contractor doesn't matter if you're being paid by somebody. Now, the question you might get into is like, what if you're only paid 5% versus 100% or whatever? But like, you know, we've always been fairly conservative in terms of if it would look like there's potential that
I would
right?
do something different, propose some different text here, and
Okay.
put not about income, but put off if you are, you know, if somebody's paying you, if you are representing that company on the TSC, even if it's 5% of your income, then you are affiliated with that company.
Right.
Like I would.
Yeah, because we got into the discussion in the CPC, like, well, what if it's only 5% of your job, even if you get 100% of your pay from the company? So it's basically like even in a lot of these things, it's even the appearance. So like if it could appear like you're acting on behalf of the company,
Yeah, exactly.
then it should be counted, right? Because like we want to be fairly. So do you want to propose some other text, or what do we want to do?
I think we should, like, I don't like that 50% over 50%. I don't like that sentence of 50% of income.
Right.
Okay. Apart from that, I am Apart from that, I'm good. But I don't like that 50% of income. Like there is that sentence over 50% of income from one company. I don't think is correct.
Right, or even, but like, contractors and freelancers, I guess that when you say 50%, as it says the majority of, like it says, contractors and freelancers consider affiliated with the company only if the majority of their time or income is tied to a single company.
Yeah, and remove that, I would remove that. That is redundant for me. Or anyway,
Individuals funded by public grants or organizations serving as fiscal hosts are not considered affiliated.
Just one question, because it feels like we're overcomplicating a situation of our own rules. Like, I mean, these rules are implied by this group. Yeah, so if we do that, we could even change those rules at any time if we want to. And therefore, like, if we feel like someone is affiliated or not, that should matter.
I see Richard has his hand up next.
Yeah, I was just rereading that bit of the that bit of the doc. I think it's missing the why we have that sentence there in the first place. I think it's quite implicit to us that to the people here why we've got those sentences about affiliation and being affiliated with employees, but we don't actually say in the document why we have that on the TSC that we don't we want to.
it actually doing that change in that way might actually be better, Richard.
So what I'm saying is that rather than getting bogged down into the, how specific can we make the rule, maybe we should be explaining what the desired outcome is, and then the rule could be a little bit less exact, but sort of indicate how that goal is. We're trying to meet that goal in limiting the, I guess, the influence that any one particular organization can insert. Can assert over the project. But yeah, it just seems that I guess it's an implicit, that we understand why that's there, but when you read the thing in isolation, it's not actually clear. It's just a statement. It just says this is the rule without sort of explaining why that is there, written into our charter, because there's obviously historical reasons involved in how the project.
I can rewrite it and propose something slightly different if you want. I can try a different take, which is more loose on one end and more tight.
I just think that it's going to be impossible to define all of the edge cases.
Exactly.
With an edge case, which is like, oh, what about this case that we haven't considered? And rather than make the whole thing like a whole block of legalese that no one's going to be able to understand, probably better to start with what's the desired outcome, and then can we come up with a few sentences to help people get to that outcome without being so wholly prescriptive that we just have to infinitely revise the text every time someone comes up with a new edge case.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, that sounds definitely, because I don't think like Richard said, getting all the different edge cases, we're probably not going to be able to do that properly. So sounds like Matteo, you volunteered to do another pass that.
Yeah. I can write something. I can do another round of proposals. So
sounds good. So okay.
Do you want me to do that in that same PR? I can push that task in that same PR.
Yeah, I think so, because it's got the discussion, right? So you can say, we discussed it in the TSC meeting and we agreed this is the approach we want to take versus like narrowing down the nitty gritty. We want to provide more context and still keep the rule effectively vague, right?
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll move on to the next one. Let's talk about the CI situation. I don't know if there's anything more to talk about that. The next one, which is Open Collective and GitHub sponsors, there has been some discussion in the issue. I did say in the issue, unless there's any objections, we'll consider that landed and move on to trying to turn those on. So that was really one of our next steps was, I guess, maybe not totally related, but like one of our next step was to try and bring on somebody to do some work on the CI. I've sort of got the informal, there's not going to be any money from the foundation. And so I think we'll assume that unless we hear any different before but by the end of the year. And so the next thing would be like, okay, if we can get some funding through Open Collective or GitHub sponsors, maybe that's our next step on that. So unless anybody else has anything on the CI they want to add, well, I'll just say nothing new to discuss this week.
Yagis wanted to talk about something that's kind of related to the CI situation,
Okay.
which is the where is it? It was he posted a comment in. I thought he posted a comment in the issue. Okay, maybe it was in the builders. He's opened an issue.
There was, I think, an issue in the TSC repo.
Yeah, no, this one 1663 about the smart OS situation. So I guess since you wanted to discuss, I could briefly recap. We're in the middle of transitioning some machines around. So for, I guess as a quick recap, we had a whole bunch of machines that were originally sponsored by Joint, and then Joint, spun off their node interests into a company called MNX to look after the SmartOS platforms. So the machines that used to be hosted by Joint, they were moved to Equinix Metal, but they were still being paid for by MNX, I believe. And then Equinix informed us that they would like us to move our non-ARM, so it's all of our x64 workloads off of Equinix Metal. And MNX kindly stepped in and sponsored, self-hosting the machines that we used to have. So that migration is still in progress. I mean, some of the large bits of infrastructure have moved over. That includes the SmartOS machines, and there was some effort spent on that some months ago. Especially around the node 23, just before the 23 release, where there were lots of different sort of infrastructure things going on at the same time, including like the macOS stuff, which is not related to this. But it's also been tied up with like us trying to get the Linux Foundation to take over, to be more involved in helping us run the infrastructure. And I think this is just one of the things that's fallen through the cracks. So it's kind of still being worked on, but it's perhaps not being worked on, or either the visibility is not enough to that, it, at least in this particular case, it's blocking a particular collaborator's PRs from landing because the current images that we want to migrate off of are sort of running old, outdated software. So, the plan is to move to newer things. We're not there yet. So, I did see that Matteo posted in one of the issues that was related that maybe we set some deadline to try and get to try and move things on a bit, and maybe that is a reasonable thing. But yeah, it's a challenge to maintain the entire all of the stuff we've got running in the CI, and part of that is also trying to spread the actual burden of maintenance sort of among more people, so that it's not just one person all the time bottlenecked for the entire sort of build infra. And this is one of the things caught up in that.
Yeah, Mateo's got his hand up.
Yeah, my recommendation, the situation is, for me, is very clear. Okay, there's an area of the project that is not getting enough attention. Okay, and which means that there's not enough volunteers to cover for it. Okay, and because it's extremely niche. Okay, I don't know what are the download numbers, but we can get those. Okay, so let me try to see if I can scavenge those numbers. But the usage
will be zero because we stopped providing binaries on that platform.
Sorry, we stopped completely?
I believe so. It was a very long time ago. Yeah. The joint employees that we had at the time made that suggestion that because of the way that Node is built on that platform, where it sort of links to system libraries and things, that they didn't feel that trying to do the work to release binaries was worth the effort. But continuing to test it in the CI was something that they still wanted us to pursue.
It
But
came
I'll-
down to like nobody would use the binaries we published because of the way SmartOS works, but it was still important that they be able to build and publish binaries. So keeping it in test makes sense for that, even though we wouldn't ship
Sorry,
binaries.
how come it's a tier 2 platform if that? Like, sorry, to be clear, this is
I think the tier 2, that might be a different I'm not sure if tier 2 says we do publish binaries, does it?
Not exactly. Tier 2 says these platforms represent smaller segments of the Node.js user base, which is definitely true.
Right. Yep.
Node.js build working group maintains infrastructure for full test coverage. Test failures on tier 2 platforms will block releases. Infrastructure issues may delay the release of binaries for these platforms, but that doesn't say that the binaries will be produced. It just said they may delay the release.
Right. So I think in this case it was still important to them that it be in the test coverage and at tier 2. And they are supporting the project through machine, a number of the machines that they're supporting are not SmartOS. So there is some support there that's not tied to just the platform. But I still agree with Matteo that we should set some sort of deadline, and then based on that deadline, if we can't get either Ryan or the volunteers, I think we discussed that already, that basically we would try and get it, but at some point we would have to turn off the testing with the hope that it comes back once the issues are resolved. So I guess Mateo's made a proposals. I think that's reasonable to me. I don't know if anybody else has any concerns with it or. I mean, Richard, I don't know if the other option is that for the particular, obviously, is it that it just doesn't build anymore with the changes that Yagiz wants to get in, or is it that some tests would fail?
Yes, the changes that he wants to propose are C++. I can't remember which C++. It's a C. It requires a later C++. So effectively, you need to be running on GC 11 or 12.
Right. Okay. So you can't
Which,
just exclude some
which
tests.
is available on SmartOS, but only on the newer images, which
Right.
the existing machines aren't, but the new machines would be. But the new machines aren't being used because of, I don't remember the exact details. I think you were involved that we did have issues building on the new machines.
Yeah, I don't know all the details, but yeah, there's some complications on hosts and whatever, but I think if we're okay with Mateo's suggestion and we'd go with that, I think Brian's going to prioritize that. We've had him focused on the Mac stuff because that's obviously important. And I think if he can then also fit this in, sounded like he didn't really realize it was holding things up. So
those are the two platforms that Yuki's is in the PRs. The same PRs are those two platforms are being flagged because they're on older compilers that we have plans in place to migrate to newer things that would have the newer compilers, but the plans are still in progress. So yeah, getting refocusing on those, and I guess having deadlines would help focus the efforts on that front. But I think probably at least from the new year we need to try and push those along and not have them drag on too much longer.
I think that's good context with Mateo having a plan. Anybody have any other suggestions or comments? So I'm gonna say the deadline of 2025 02/14 02/14 to get the machines updated makes sense. Otherwise, the testing on Smart OS would be temporarily disabled until they are. And I'm gonna say, I think the tier level should be discussed as a separate issue. Like, is that, Matteo, you okay with that? Like, I think that can be this issue is really about just getting them back, whether it should be tier 2 or tier 3. I think that's maybe a different
Well,
discussion.
it's not, Michael, because
Okay.
it's not because we want to unblock the project. The goal is to unblock the project,
Yep.
not to. The goal is to unblock the project. So, in the way moving it to tier 3 is a way to unblock the project. It doesn't matter to block. I don't want to migrate it to tier 3. Okay, I would very much prefer it to get it fixed. But if we have no volunteers to do the work, then there's no other option.
Right. I guess I was saying, like, we're agreed we'll just disable the test. Like, we'll stop testing on it. I don't know
But
that means.
that means migrating to test to tier 3. That's exactly what it means.
Okay.
Tier 2 requires the test to pass.
Yeah, I guess it could be then, is it with the agreement that it goes back to tier 2 once it's re-enabled?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I will say
Yeah.
yeah. That would be my if it doesn't. I just want to unblock the situation. I don't feel preventing not upgrading to new versions of GCC will probably be worse for the project long term. And we are not providing the builds anymore for that platform too. So if that's the case, then
Testing, passing. So I'm going to say, so we discussed in the TSC meeting, and there seemed to be agreement that setting the deadline of 2025 02/14 to get the machines updated makes sense. Otherwise, testing on SmartOS would be temporarily disabled, then in brackets, and documented as tier 3 until they are. The assumption would be that it would go back to tier 2 once the machines are re-enabled and testing pass. Does that fit what people are thinking?
I think so. We may be forced to move that deadline earlier for a separate reason, which is they're still running like Java 8 to run the Jenkins agents, which means that if we there's 2 recent Jenkins LTS releases that we've not upgraded the CI to, which drop support for Java 8. So again, that's sort of the things that will catch that platform in that if we upgraded to the current Jenkins LTS release, which I think we're okay at the moment because the 2 most recent releases only fix very low severity issues or issues in things that we're not using. But at some point, we are going to have to upgrade Jenkins. And if those machines aren't running like later Java to run the agents, then they wouldn't connect to Jenkins. So they may get cut off anyway at an earlier date. But it's all related into, let's try and refocus on getting that migration done. And if not, then those machines will, that testing will have to be suspended temporarily. And it comes back to your statement that, we would like to get it back, but if our hand, if it may be forced on us as a temporary measure.
Okay, so I just added that as an FYI, so that it's like just trying to set the expectations, right? And I think hopefully it'll be fair, like, it'll address concerns that, like, it'll go back if they do get addressed, and there's a fixed time. Sorry, Matteo?
Sorry, I have one thing more to add to the previous topic, the one of the TSC charter change.
Okay. I will, any
I've used
more on
this.
this one?
Yes, no, this one is good. Sorry,
Okay.
I just, before
Yep.
we finish, I have something.
Go ahead.
I used the same term. This time has passed, so I didn't notice earlier, but I've used the same term that the CPC impact stage requirement uses. So, and the CPC statement says, have a defined governing body of at least 5 or more members, owners and core maintainers, or which no more than 1/3 is affiliated with the same employer. In case there are 5 governing members, 2 may be from the same employer. Now, why the heck we are being asked to clarify this when the CPC is absolutely not clarifying it in the first place? Sorry to be pushing back, but I'm going to pass this.
But I think it's that we were clarifying that contractors were included, and you could see that the CPC one doesn't say that, right? So
No,
it's
the CPC one used the affiliated term, which is what we use.
affiliated. Okay.
Use the
I-
exact same term. So if
I think it was just that like somebody was like, hey, this actually is kind of vague. I'll provide something more specific. Like, I don't
what
think
I'm saying, if we need to be more
Yeah.
specific, the CPC needs to be more specific, because this requirement comes from the CPC.
Right. I think it's a suggestion. So like for us, we are completely within our scope to say, no, we prefer it the way it is. Let's just leave it. Right.
So,
Like
I will propose a new text anyway that explains
Yeah.
the why. Okay. But I'm just saying it's not necessary. If they want to clarify it, they will need to be clarified at the CPC level what they mean, because it's in the verbiage of the CPC.
Right. I'll add, like, the proposer of the change said, well, it seems like, not too many people really resonated with them. Not a problem. I said was like, hey, it's just been a few days. It's just a suggestion. So like, I don't want anybody to think that they're like trying to force us to do this. I think it was more of like, hey, this is a suggestion. And so like, it's not the CPC saying, hey, be more specific. It's just like, hey, we looked at it. Maybe this makes sense. But I think we're also like, we can say, and where I'm kind of falling is happy with the way it was, probably better not to try and find all the rules. And if you have I think Richard's comment of like a little more context.
That is great. I will also
Yeah.
send a PR to the CPC one
Yeah.
to clarify.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea too, right? Like to, so yeah, I think, whatever we decide will in the end be fine. It's just, it was a suggestion for us to consider versus anything else. That takes us to the end of the agenda. We have 2 minutes, so I guess at this point I'll suggest we skip the strategic initiatives for this week. Matteo is gonna chair, I think, the next meeting, and then we canceled the meeting after that for everybody who's follows the streams. So I guess at this point, thanks for everybody's time and for participation in the project, and we'll see everybody next time.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.